Once there was a parishioner who had just finished giving a generous gift of $100,000, and the pastor of the church and the stewardship chairman were very grateful. And then a couple of days later, they read in the news that that very same giver had given over $2 million to a different charitable institution, not the church. This illustrates what to many church leaders about religious giving these days, it's discouraging and mystifying. Why do people give? Why do they give so little? And why do some give so much? What are the conditions for that? But through this presentation, we hope to communicate that there's reason to hope and some actions that we can take as leaders to inspire greater generosity and to help our people be better stewards overall. There's some research that tells us something about U.S. religious giving and really the inherent stinginess of many of them. To begin with, 20% of Christians give nothing at all to any charitable institution. Most American Christians give very little, and Lutherans are less than 2% at the median. Most of what is given is actually given by a very small minority of our congregations. And lastly, and interestingly, how much someone makes doesn't really predict how much they're going to give. Poor people are just as likely to give generously than rich people. So why is it that U.S. Christians are so stingy? Well, the research tells us a few things. Number one, that we're surrounded by a culture of really rampant consumerism that by constantly communicating through media and through all the messages around us that we live in a situation of scarcity. We don't have enough, and therefore we can't afford to give. Clergy are uncomfortable with dealing with the issues of money. They are insecure about it, or they feel a fear of rejection, or they may be unresolved about their own personal stewardship. But for various reasons, clergy don't tackle this issue head on and directly with people. And therefore, Christians end up being uninformed, confused about giving. What is the theology of giving? What is money good? Is money bad? Is money sort of neutral depending on how it's used? What are the expectations? What do we mean by tithe or not tithing? How should we regard money? Some givers actually don't trust their organizations based on what they've seen, whether it's incompetence or blatant untrustworthiness, and they've seen things that they are suspect. They're likely to hold back, not just to one, because of one example might affect their giving to many organizations. It might just leave a bad taste and untrustworthiness in their minds. Overall, as a culture, Christians are part of the American culture, which is radically privatized. Most of the very private things we do, or the very important things we do, are hidden from others. Our motives for giving, our amounts, purposes for money are hidden. Just like many of the important aspects of our life, we hide them from each other, and that's just endemic in American society these days. American Christians are likely to avoid systematic routine methods for giving. So it's just not as motivating. They want to feel spontaneous or spirit-led and are then less likely to do things like pledging or sign up for electronic giving. Those things, for whatever reason, just don't end up feeling as gratifying as they could. And yet, some people really are generous with their giving, regardless of their income. And why might that be? What can we learn about people who do give? Well, the main reason, and we'll come back to this, is that people who give believe in the mission and the vision of what they're giving to. It's something that's worthy of their generosity. A fine definition of stewardship is that it's the proper care for everything that's been entrusted to one, and it's the recognition of and response to the potential at hand. It's a very rich definition of stewardship that generous givers believe in their hearts. Another reason why people give is that they have a high regard for the leaders of the church. There's a sense of trust and relationship and community that they have, which reinforces and is reinforced by the mission focus that we talked about a moment ago. And then lastly, people give to organizations that they view as fiscally stable, that are solvent and successful. They give to successful ministries. and not those that are that constantly communicate that they're in crisis. Um, Success and solvency tends to motivate giving. So then, what is it that church leaders can do to inspire better generosity and better stewardship? Well, church leaders, pastors, start beginning with pastors, need to start by working through their own securities about money and fundraising. Through prayer, through meditation, through cultivating their own spirit of generosity, they need to get to a place of confidence and gratitude that can begin in their hearts and radiate outward in their message and in their ministry. Then church leaders, pastors, can be clear and positive and passionate about the mission and vision of their congregations. In my case, Rejoice, our mission is to be a place where God is experienced, community is shared, and lives are changed. And that is and should be a part of everything that we ask our people to give towards, and our mission needs to radiate from that. More practically, preachers need to teach and preach clearly about money, about how to regard it, about a theology of giving, a theology of money, and be clear about things like expectations, how best to acquire money, how to be honest and have integrity in how we acquire it, manage it, how we regard money, and how we spend it. Back to the mission, one of the most important things we can do as church leaders is to show the results of mission, to demonstrate to people in the congregation and to everyone how God is at work in our congregation changing lives. This is part of the success, and it's what people really give to. They want to see lives changed, whether it's through small group stories or youth stories or children's stories or whatever the mission is. We want to see that playing out. How we talk about giving and money should vary based on who we're talking to. Different segments of our congregation are really coming from different places, and we need to start with where they are. If people are brand new Christians and new at giving, we want to talk to them in a certain way. And if they're mature Christians and who have been abundant in their giving, we can talk to them a different way. The bottom line is to, communicate with people where they are. We need to help people become better stewards through education and support. Particularly in this culture of consumerism, people need help to work through how they handle and manage money. It's one of the most stressful and anxiety-prone things that they have in their lives, and the church can be a voice and a support in how they can be better stewards. And we can take a routine of giving and actually go beyond and make it a holy ritual, make it something like prayer to actually give to the congregation. When we do our budgeting, we should use what's called a narrative budget, which is taking in the mission of the church and building our budget around the mission and the impact that we're going to have through the congregation's mission. That gives some people a clear picture and a story of how their giving is going to lead to changed lives. And to keep that budgeting and stewardship efforts separate. Budgeting is something that happens once a year to manage the resources coming in, but stewardship is an effort that should be year-round. And lastly, we need to say thank you to God and to givers, often in many ways, on our knees, in private and in public, in written and verbal communications. We need to say thank you to our great God who is doing work through us and through the missions of our congregation and through the generosity of our givers.